In this video, we're going to look at another function that has a limited domain, and that's square roots. So again, one more time, domain is the x values we're allowed to plug into our function. So what are we allowed to plug into square roots? Well, we can look at the graph to kind of see what happens with the basic square root function. And this is my basic square root function. And you can see there's nothing over here because I'm not allowed to plug these x values into my graph. So I can't plug negatives into my square root, but I can put in 0 right there, and then all of these positive x values. All right, so my domain for my square root is everything that's bigger than or equal to 0. Okay, 0 does work, it's right there, but all the negatives don't work. All right, so for a more complex square root problem, we have to make sure whatever we're taking the square root of is greater than or equal to 0. And to do this, we're going to just create an inequality. All right, so we want to find the domain of this function. Again, there's 3 out here. We can multiply anything by 3. We can subtract anything by 5. But as soon as we see the square root, we know whenever we're taking the square root of something, that thing, whatever's inside the square root, has to be bigger than or equal to 0. Because this ended up being less than 0, like -2, then it wouldn't make sense. You can't take the square root of -2 and graph it. All right, so we subtract the 4 to the other side and divide by 2. All right, we're going to get this x by itself, and now we know our domain is all the x values that are bigger than or equal to -2. You may notice this is very similar to what we do for logarithms. The only difference is logarithms, you just have a greater than sign. For square roots, you have the greater than or equal than sign. So you include 0 as well for square roots, but not for logs. So they're very, very similar. Just that one small difference is just that little line. All right, so here's another example, finding the domain of this square root function. Again, the -2 and the 17 don't matter because I can multiply anything by -2, add 17 anything. But for square roots, I have to make sure whatever I take the square root of is bigger than or equal to 0. Now I want to solve for this x. I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. Divide by -15. Again, since I'm dividing by a negative, it's going to flip this the other direction. And then simplify a bit. This is 1/3. All right, so now I have a less than or equal to. Again, if this was a logarithm problem, the only difference with this equal sign would not be here. But since it's a square root problem, it is. All right, so that's everything you need to know for a domain. All right, know which functions have full domains, know how to do logs and square roots, and then you're good.